As ATLUS releases games, whether it's MegaTen related or not, 9 times out of 10 we can expect a great game for them. And although ATLUS has a very great track record with most of their games, and even some of their re-releases, their re-release and especially DLC practices not very much. Now ATLUS is somewhat infamous when it comes to their re-releases. Although the re-releases they put out for the most part benefit the game greatly, such as Persona 5 Royal, or a more recent example, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, some people aren't just fans of these type of re-releases for a few reasons. First off, re-releases can discourage fans from buying the initial release of a game, because they expect it to be a much better version of the game in a few years. However, the problem with this is that unless they just don't use social media for a few years, there's a high chance that they're going to get spoiled on whatever new game is out, especially Persona games, because the Persona fans are awful at keeping spoilers secret. And I think that's also part of the problem. Since the internet can be a minefield for spoilers, some people may feel inclined to buy the initial release of an ATLUS game to prevent themselves from being spoiled and having fear of missing out. I feel like it was especially a problem because at first, most MegaTen releases didn't even come out in multiple consoles. Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal was PlayStation only for a while until the ports came out in 2022. It was also the same situation for re-releases in the PS2 era, such as Persona 3 FES or the Japanese releases of Nocturne. Of course, these re-releases aren't all bad. Like I said before, it can fix many issues about the game and introduce new content that wasn't in the original. I'll even give ATLUS a pass for re-releases in the PS2 era since there were no updates or DLCs, but I still find it weird that in an age where updates and DLCs have pretty much become the norm, it's a surprise that ATLUS never utilized this for their games. Oh wait, ATLUS DLCs. Holy shit. Let's talk about ATLUS DLCs. ATLUS have been infamous for their practice of day one DLCs for a while now, pretty much since the 3DS era. In my opinion, this needs to stop at some point. I'm sure we all know the situations with Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight and Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. At least with the DLC for Persona 4 Dancing All Night, it was actually of some quality and the game itself was pretty good. As decent as P3D is and as unbelievably trash as P5D is, you cannot deny the DLC practice for these games were unacceptable. Most of the DLCs were either shitty costumes and accessories or additional songs that probably should have been in the game to begin with. And that's another problem with day one DLCs from ATLUS games and re-releases. A lot of the content in the DLCs could have been in the game to begin with, such as, I don't know, the multiple DLC personas and costumes that are in the Persona 5 games. Another thing I don't understand is ATLUS also offering free DLCs, and by that I mean having the difficulty level be locked behind free DLC. I mean, I guess it's not really quote unquote locked if it's free DLC, but why couldn't have this been included in the game in the first place? They did this with games like P5 Vanilla, Nocturne Remaster, and more recently SMT5 Vengeance. Speaking of Vengeance, it makes no sense to me how they did the DLC for this game. They include all the DLC from the original SMT5 and Vengeance, which is definitely a good thing. But then why turn around and make more day one DLC for a re-release of a game? And I'm not gonna act like I never spent money on some of these DLCs, because I'm definitely guilty of that. But even I have limits, because a lot of these DLCs can be hella expensive. Like, come on, I'm not gonna spend $60 for a costume and BGM bundle when I could easily use Apple Music or something and listen to the music while playing the game. And I'm definitely not spending $20 just to see Akechi and Kasumi and Tactica of all games. Speaking of money, buying the game day one for around $60 to $70 is already a huge investment in and of itself. And you're telling me you want people to pay even more for the day one DLCs of these games? This goes for almost any game company, but to stay on subject, let's keep it on ATLUS. For example, for people who paid $200 for the August edition or the $100 digital premium edition of Persona 3 Reload, ATLUS, knowing full well they were going to release the answer as $30 DLC, didn't even bother to include the expansion pass in either edition of Persona 3 Reload. And the expansion pass isn't even that good either. Other than the answer, which I assume takes up most of the price, there are costumes and BGM. Sound familiar, anyone? Another thing I noticed in recent years is the fact that for most physical ATLUS releases, they don't have any sort of deluxe edition that comes with the DLC. This has somewhat changed with Persona 3 Reload and more recently Metaphor, but there was a point in time where ATLUS wouldn't give physical buyers any type of bonus other than a steelbook or something. I mean, if you're gonna have day one DLC, at least give both physical and digital buyers a choice to get a deluxe edition with all DLC, so physical buyers that do want to get day one DLC, for whatever reason, don't have to get the DLC separately and spend more. Overall, are ATLUS re-releases a problem? Yes and no. On one hand, it can be a great way for Atlus to fix certain problems about the game and add in new content that can provide new incentive to buy the new version. However, a lot of these can be fixed with DLC and updates that are, for one, reasonably priced, and for two, provide enough content to warrant doing this. As for day one DLC, yeah, no, fuck that.